Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. This is my review for Scream, aka Scream 5, because despite the film's title, this is not a remake, it's a sequel. But unlike 2018's Halloween, this movie doesn't ignore the 3 sequels in between this and the first one. Now, I haven't seen any of the Scream sequels. I've seen the original, and I love that original film. I actually did a review for it a couple years back. But this movie opens very similar to the original film. A girl gets a call from a mysterious voice who asks her some questions about horror films, but unfortunately it leads to her getting stabbed repeatedly. And this is not a spoiler at all, this character does survive, unlike Drew Barrymore's character in the original film. So once again, the original characters are roped back into this string of murders, while also accompanied by a new cast of characters, including the older sister of the girl that got stabbed earlier in the film. Now, we all know the original Scream. It's one of the most influential horror movies ever made, directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson. It's pretty much a more realized version of what Wes Craven wanted to do with New Nightmare, and it set the tone for the entire genre, at least up until the remake era, starting with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I said earlier, I have not seen any of the sequels, so when I saw trailers for this movie, I just kind of thought to myself, why are we getting another one? I never had any true desire to watch the Scream sequels, and I thought that first movie was really good as its own. I didn't think it needed any more following up on, although since I've seen all the Nightmare, Halloween, and Friday sequels, I guess I should get around to the Scream sequels eventually. And plus, you have to take into consideration that this is the first movie not directed by Wes Craven since he passed away in 2015, and it's also the first movie in the series to not be written by Kevin Williamson. So, with all of that, I just wasn't as excited for this movie as a lot of other people were. That was until I realized who was directing it. It's the same duo who directed Ready or Not, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, and I love Ready or Not. I think it's one of the most underrated movies of the last decade. It's one of my favorite movies of the year it came out, 2019. So I got a little more excited for this new Scream once I realized that these two were making it, and I gotta say, it didn't disappoint at all. And for somebody who has not seen any of the sequels, I didn't feel like I really missed out on anything. The movie was pretty easy to follow, and it felt pretty standalone. And I suppose one of the reasons that this movie feels like that is because, much how the first Scream movie was sort of a meta take on horror films, where you had characters that were aware of horror movie tropes, this movie is pretty much about the trend going on right now, not just with horror, but with big movies in general. The requel effect, where pretty much you make a movie where it's connected to a series of films without ever flat out remaking it, but you kind of go through the same tropes, like Creed, Star Wars The Force Awakens, and to an extent, since this movie shares the same name as the original, Halloween, from 2018, as I mentioned beforehand. And when I originally watched this movie, I thought it kind of suffered from some of the same problems that those other movies suffered from that I mentioned earlier, where, yeah, they're really good, but they're also kind of falling into the tropes of just repeating the same scenarios and not doing anything that creative. But that's the whole point of this movie. This movie is unbelievably meta, and if that's not your thing, then you might not enjoy this movie that well, but because of its meta sensibilities, I was able to give this movie a pass for repeating elements from the first Scream. I haven't seen the sequels, so I don't know if it repeats anything from those films. The cast is pretty good as well. Obviously, you've got the returning players, Neve Campbell, David Arquette, and Courteney Cox from the original 4 movies. But in terms of your new characters, your lead is Melissa Barrera, who you saw from In the Heights. And she plays the main character of this movie, Sam Carpenter, which that last name, I'm pretty sure, is a nod to John Carpenter. And there's some elements with this character that I can't really go into, otherwise I'll be spoiling the movie. The whole point of this and the original, and I assume the whole series, is that they're whodunit films. And you kind of need to have that air of mystery to know what was going on. But what they do with her character is really good. Melissa Barrera gives a really good performance. I mean, the entire cast is pretty good. I can't think of anybody that really stood out as being bad. maybe the boyfriend, but that's a very big maybe. But that's probably as far as I'll go in terms of criticisms involving the characters. The kills are really good. It's got some great suspenseful moments. Although I gotta say, there are a few too many jump scares for my personal taste. Not as bad as Halloween H2O, but could have done without some of these jump scares. If I had any last minute criticisms, and this is not entirely the movie's fault, it's that early on I could predict what was going on, like who the killer was. I knew instantly, but it was also the most logical choice on who the killer is. Now, there is also another element in this movie that happens near the end that I didn't see coming, and I'm not sure entirely worked. I might have to see the movie again in order to fully understand it, which I plan on doing, because even though it sounds like I've been criticizing this movie for a good chunk of the review, I actually like it a lot. Very well directed, it's suspenseful, it's got some really slick and cool kills, and even though the movie does repeat elements from the original Scream, I give it a pass more than I do with some other movies just because it's a meta commentary on not only these tropes in some of the movies that I mentioned earlier, like Star Wars, Ghostbusters, and Creed, but this movie also makes fun of toxic fandom and how obsessive fans can be over what are essentially movies. Like, I'm overly obsessive with something like Godzilla, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but at the end of the day, I acknowledge they're just movies and they're not something to be overly worked up about, for better and for worse. Yeah, this movie's a lot of fun. I'd say it's worth seeing in your lifetime, and that's shocking considering that this is a January horror movie that doesn't suck. Not only is this movie good, but it's actually a lot better than you'd think. And it made me interested enough to see the sequels, and thankfully this is only the 5th movie, because if I had to go through all these other movies like I did with Halloween, Friday the 13th, or Nightmare on Elm Street, that's gonna be a real chore. When I'll be reviewing the Scream sequels, I don't know. Not this Halloween, because I already have the lineup of my horror reviews set up, but definitely some point in the future. I want to see those movies, I want to review them, because this movie right here is a ton of fun. And there you go, that's my review for 2022's Scream. I hope you enjoyed it, and now I want to know what you guys think about the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one. Hello everyone, I just wanted to say thank you all for watching my review for Scream, or Scream 5. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day, and take care of yourselves.